The House overwhelmingly passed the Stop Asian Hate bill on Tuesday, clearing the way for President Biden to sign it into law. Specifically, it calls for the Justice Department and state leaders to increase oversight of hate crimes. All of this comes as Asian American business leaders call for more action in tackling anti-Asian hate. Let's bring in Allen Shim. He is the CFO of Slack. And Allen, of course, we're talking to you because you signed on to this letter back in March calling for, number one, $1 million in commitments to increase resources to fight this, but also calling for other leaders to step up and speak out. This is an issue that's been going on even before the pandemic, but I wonder what you think has actually changed. What propelled you to sign on to this?
Well, thanks for having me, Akiko. It is amazing to be part of this, as you know, recognizing Asian Americans this month. For me, the change was pretty recent. Over the last few months, when I saw attacks on the elderly, there was an immediate connection for me to my own story of immigrant parents and grandparents who I could see in those people. And some of those people were killed. And that really hit home for me and really caused me to reflect and rethink the way I was approaching this. Because, to date, I've been viewing this more as kind of a bystander and someone that, passively is trying to support things in the background here, but not realizing the platform I have as a business leader to really amplify the voices of our employees in particular.
Certainly, you're in the Bay Area where we've seen a lot of these attacks really play out on camera. There's a lot of Asian Americans in the tech community. I wonder what you think the resistance has been. You're talking about why you decided to speak now, but what has held some of these executives back from speaking out until now, you think?
From my own point of view, there are definitely different cultures and norms that I think we've accepted as business leaders. You could be a little bit cynical and say that people are increasingly doing some of these things because they think it's good for business. But I think at the end of the day, when you're asking people to spend the majority of their waking hours at the office, at work, they're going to bring their whole selves to the office. And you're seeing more and more of that, particularly in the tech community, where embracing that is really important. And making sure that employees are seen, they're heard, and their stories are understood, and how that can be addressed and spoken to and supported, whatever the circumstance may be. And this particular moment has been really important because Asian Americans have a history of maybe cultural norms where some of those things are meant to be buried down. They're meant to go with the flow, not cause a stir, not rock the boat. And I think as an Asian American myself, it was really important to acknowledge those employees' conflict in that feeling and to really help them speak out and to, again, have their voices be heard and let them be seen in terms of their concerns, right? That's why for me, when it hit that close to home, it really connected the dots for me in terms of my role in this.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you might take it for granted. You might assume that that's the belief, at the top of any company. But we've been increasingly hearing from some tech names out there, Coinbase included, in terms of the way they want to run their companies when it comes to maybe leaving political issues or society issues, anything that doesn't have to do with the company outside of the office. And you guys obviously went a very different way. You guys matched you and your CEO here and the chief of staff kind of pooling to match the donations that came from employees there at Slack. And I'd be curious to maybe get your take from a leadership perspective, why it might be more important to maybe not endorse this idea that you'd leave everything that isn't related to work out of the office, and why it's so important to you from a philosophical and leadership standpoint to not do that.
It's an interesting story in terms of how those donations even came to be. We have a channel in Slack called Slack AMA. It allows employees to reach out to the entire leadership team and ask any question. So it's Ask Me Anything. And in the course of that, as these events were happening, as these hate crimes were happening, one of the Asian American employees put out a question that just suggested, hey, if you want to support this, if we could support this, what can Slack do to support various Asian American organizations in the US, in the Bay Area, to show our solidarity in this effort? And for myself, it didn't really even occur to me to necessarily jump on that right away until a really brave employee pinged me, another Asian American that I knew, and she nudged me and said, listen, it would mean a lot for me to see you and the leadership team step out and support us in a very meaningful and visible way. And so as a result of that, what was initially a suggestion of organizations that all employees could donate to became a matching campaign from myself and 4 other executives, where each of us matched and we collectively raised a few $100,000, $300,000 to be exact, to these various organizations. And to me, the role there was, how do I amplify what our employees are already feeling? How do I acknowledge the fact that we are asking for a lot of the time, energy, effort of these employees to bring their whole selves, to bring their full capacity. And if this is weighing them down, how can we not acknowledge it? How can we not support them in that? Now, companies are still businesses, and I'm not trying to take away from that, but I think having a forum where people can have this dialogue in a constructive way, in a productive way, is a necessary part of really supporting employees. I think in this current, modern world where the internet and news is a 24/7 cycle, we have to acknowledge the fact that we can't just hold it out. We can't shut it down because it's pervasive. It's everywhere, and we need instead to embrace and find ways to engage with our employees to make that a productive discussion.
And finally, Allen, before we let you go, we're talking right now as more and more offices think about what this new workplace is going to look like. Slack is largely operated as a distributed workforce. You've also got this merger with Salesforce that could sort of change the dynamic too. And I'm wondering, as you look to the months ahead, what does this reimagined workplace look like for you? How are you thinking about the reopening process? What does that workplace look like for Slack?
If I could maybe simplify it, it starts with, what's your default? Where are you starting from, your starting place? Because if your starting place is February of 2020, and you try to then modify those conditions to something that you think will be relevant for the future, you're going to have a lot of changes that you're going to have to navigate. Instead, if we anchor more to, and the starting place is May of 2021, and you think about all the things that we've benefited from in terms of flexible work, being able to have flexible schedules, so not just location, but also time. All those things I think are going to be, and you're hearing this, we're seeing the vast majority, I think it's 70-80% in our latest survey, want some degree of flexibility. And so if you start there, then the new workplace looks a lot like the current workplace. And that's really our belief, which is this shift from physical to digital means a default to digital. So a digital first mindset. And there's all this capital, as a CFO, there's all this capital that was being spent in your physical space that can now effectively be redeployed and actually made a lot more productive if you think about how to invest behind your employees in a digital first workplace going forward.
It's going to be interesting to see how this all evolves. Allen Shim, Slack CFO, great to talk to you today. Appreciate your time.